While we're preparing the presentation, my name is Koy. Just so you know, I'm the country manager or country coordinator for PFAN in the Philippines. And I was originally part of the regional PFAN team when the first phase of PFAN was running in Southeast Asia. So this presentation is a product of my experience during that time. And so my objective is just to put this workshop into perspective so that you know what the end product of the overall process is. Okay, so, oh, sorry. So let me just get the presentation on there. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about is what is the objective of this whole process. It's simply, PFAN wants to facilitate investment for your projects. And your projects have to be clean energy. And I guess the basic criteria for that is as long as it mitigates greenhouse gas emissions, then it qualifies as a clean energy project. Now, before I get into the actual process itself, I think the first thing that needs to be established is does the process work? We've done this before, and what's the result of all that effort in the first phase? So as you can see in this table, we have closed 17 projects. We have facilitated financial closure for 17 projects in 6 Asian countries, and it's the amount coming from the private sector is over $200 million US. So I think the process pretty much proved itself when we did it the first time. And we've had a lot of learnings since then. And our objective is to incorporate those learnings in this new process that we're going through here in AFCEF. And maybe before I move forward, there might be some confusion between what PFAN is and what AFCEF is. So PFAN is like the bigger program. It's a global program. And AFCEF is one of the sub-programs in that bigger program. So this AFCEF process, this workshop, will lead to an investor forum afterwards, and that is part of the whole PFAN process. Okay. So, Taiki mentioned in his slide, he had a mention of the missing middle. And I think pretty much that whole concept is what we want to address in PFAN. So, initially, we thought that by connecting the two entities, the clean energy enterprise and the investor, we could sort of come up with clean energy investments afterwards. So, but as we implemented the program, we realized that it's more than just putting them in touch with one another. Because once they meet each other, then that's where the questions come up. And PFAN has to be there to support that exchange, that communication exchange, because it's not enough that you put them in a bottle and shake and see what happens. There has to be some level of intentionality in making that financial closure happen. So, again, now to talk more about the communication problem, what usually the issue is, for example, when you talk to commercial banks, local commercial banks, which are usually the source of debt for your project, somehow they're not familiar or they're not that comfortable with the concept of investing in a clean energy project because they don't have the technical expertise. I mean, maybe clean energy is not that big in that country, so it doesn't make sense for them to maintain staff that are experts in that kind of technology. So it's sort of a black box for them. And in the same way, some clean energy entrepreneurs don't really understand how to present their financials in a way that the banks will find really marketable. So that communication gap is what we want to address in this workshop and this mentoring process. And in the end, we want to put you on the same page. So now let me get deeper into the concept of the missing middles. Now, this is it's not a scientific graph by any means. It's simply notional, just to demonstrate an idea. And so what we have here is the two entities we're trying to work with, the investor and the clean energy enterprise. And the investor, if you look at the y-axis, what they're interested in is reducing risk. That is their priority. For them, if you somehow reduce the risk of getting into that project, they'd be more interested in investing. And for you, I guess, for the developers, what you're concerned with is maturity. You want to accelerate the maturity of their project so that the risk of having that project invested on is also reduced. Now, the process of reducing risk costs money. So usually what banks do is they hire experts to do feasibility studies, and that costs money. And sometimes, if the investor is unsure, they don't want to really put money yet because they're not sure they're going to get that money back. So it's sort of a chicken and egg problem. And in the same way, some developers who obviously are looking for money themselves don't have money for that feasibility study. So the question is, who pays for this process? Who pays for reducing this risk, this shaded area? But more to the point, it's not just somebody willing to provide that cost. It has to be somebody the banks trust, somebody that the project developers trust, because if there's vested interest in making that deal happen, they're not really sure if your interests are protected. And one thing that's going for this program is we have no vested interest because we're not charging. We're not charging you, we're not charging the investor for anything at this point, at least. So that way, you know that when we offer you our services, we're there to help you. We're there to make sure that investment happens afterwards. And so the question is, who pays for the cost of reducing risk and accelerating the rate of maturity of an enterprise? Well, it's CTI PFAN, which is sort of our marketing pitch. All right, so there you go. Now, let me go deeper into the philosophy of how we designed, why we designed the program this way. So again, we're using the same graph. If you look at the bottom part first, we have several, I would say, phases. So phase one is when the developer has a concept, an idea, and sometimes at that point, it's too early for us to really get into it because one, we don't want to spoil the market. There has to be, the entrepreneur has to sort of put some skin in the game himself to be credible. If you subsidize that early stage, then you might come up with not very good projects because they haven't paid the cost of actually making something happen. So what's interesting for us is if a project has undergone a feasibility study, they have invested their time at the very least to check if the business makes sense. And then if they have a pilot project going on, that's really more interesting because we know that when you say you have done your financial analysis, there's actually a basis for that in the real world, and it's just not something you thought of. And then, of course, the more mature companies, once you're done with the pilot phase, you implement your bigger company, and hopefully it'll be commercial at that stage. And then after that, you will expand. So in phase 2 to 4, this is where we actively engage and mentor the projects. Those are the projects we want to engage in. Now, okay. Now moving to the investor. Again, this is like a notional idea of the phases, and this mostly came from our interviews with the investors and the banks. So the first phase, usually what they want is they want to source projects. So they call, like if you're a clean energy investor based in, say, Singapore, you'd probably call the Department of Energy of a particular country and see who are registered in the clean energy sector, and then you start from there. So deal sourcing, and what PFAN does is we sort of share with investors our pipeline. So that, and which in this case is you. Once we go through this mentoring program, we say, hey, we have a set of really good projects. You know who we are, and we had some experience working together before, and we think this is really what you're looking for. Then they expand their project list. And then the second phase is where they express interest. Now, this is where it gets interesting. So phase 2 and 3 is mostly their due diligence part. And so phase 1 is mostly desktop due diligence. And what that means is this doesn't cost much for them. They don't really go to the site yet. They just want to verify if the managing team is credible. Are they involved in anything shady? So it's the reputation and maybe some background on their product, what they've done so far. So that's what the phase 2 does. And interestingly, and I think this phase is what you want to bear in mind, the mentoring process you're going to enter at this point is going to address this desktop due diligence concern of the banks. So, this is not just an exercise where we want to come up with a business plan, a shiny business plan that we want to impress everybody with. It's actually for the investors. And looking at this chart, reducing the risk from this point to this point, there's a set of criteria that differs from each investor. So if you address those criteria, then they say, okay, that's a check. We assign a lower risk to your project, and we're more interested to invest. And what we want is for this mentoring process to address the criteria of these investors to a point where they reach this horizontal bar at the bottom, which is basically their threshold for risk. If you go below that, they'd be more likely to invest in your project. So I guess that paints a picture of what the objective of this mentoring program is. We want to address the specific criteria that the investors have for risk, so that risk goes down and they're more likely to invest. All right. So that at least gives you a framework of how we designed the program. Now let's get into the services we offer. Now the only, you're probably going to experience this part, which is the project development part. We have the mentoring program and the investment facilitation for the projects who are in phase 2 to 4. But we also work with the investors themselves to some level. So you won't really be keyed into that much because you're busy with this process, this AFCEF process. But bear in mind that we're also working with the investor. We're also sharing our projects with them. We're also asking them, what are you looking for? Like I was talking with Nagaraj earlier, and he was saying that at some point we'll come up with some summaries of all your projects here. And before the February Investor Forum, we'll be sharing these summaries to the investors so that when they go to the February event, they know that what they're looking for. They know that there's a project they're really interested in. And one thing useful for that is if we share that early enough, if we complete that early enough, we'll actually get the feedback of the investors and incorporate them in the mentoring process. So you see, it's very practical. We're not doing this is not a prescriptive process. We're not saying we're the experts and we know everything. No, we listen to the investors and we sort of tailor fit the mentoring process to address their particular concerns. Okay, so now, again, the whole point of putting all the money the program has in helping the investors and helping you is to facilitate financial closure. And again, that's the bottom line. We're paid to make sure deals happen. And we're going to serve your interests and the interests of the investors as much as we can to make this happen. All right. Now, briefly, this is a bit of a heavy slide, so I'll try to go through it quickly. So let me just briefly go through the first two parts, the application and the evaluation. So what you did was you applied for this, right? You sent an application form and an intention to apply. And then what happened was the TIPE's team, the CTI PFAN Secretariat selected some judges, so to speak, to do an assessment of the documents you sent. And then we did some evaluation. So we had the rating process, we had a criteria. And then out of that, the best ones, which you are, because you're the 18 out of the 40 who applied, we're going to invite you to this mentoring program. And the reason for that is we want to make sure the money we deploy for the mentors are well spent. And these are spent to the projects that are more likely going to close than the others. Now, I'm not going to talk about the specific criteria right now. But the point is, it doesn't really matter because you're here. And based on that criteria, you qualify. So what's going to happen after this is we're going to come up with a draft business plan. Now, I want to highlight this deadline because it's close. Now, this is not exactly December 12. It's December 10. So on December 10, all of you, all the semifinalists, will be expected to come up with a draft business plan. And again, one thing that I'd like to emphasize is the mentors are here to support you, but you'll be doing most of the work. And that's important because if you prepared for the elevator pitch, which is going to happen later, it's better if you prepare it yourself, right? Because if somebody prepares the elevator pitch for you and you sort of pitch it as if you were that person, it doesn't really work. And in the same logic, that's why we want to encourage you to invest as much of your time and your effort to come up with really good business plans, work with the mentors to sort of be cooperative, to meet the deadlines, because we have our deadlines ourselves. I'm one of the mentors, actually. And so this is going to be a collaborative process. And now you know why this is necessary, because it will lead to investors actually getting interested in your project. So it's worthwhile. And as I've showed you in the first slide, we've actually closed deals using this method. So you'd say that this investment could get some good returns. So Now, some of the other milestones, like on the 30th of June and the 15th of February, I think the mentors will talk about it further, but I just want to emphasize this deadline, December 10th. So forgive me for putting the wrong date there, but on December 10th, we have to come up with a business plan. So now you're gonna meet your mentors, right? And we're gonna begin the mentoring process. Then after your documents are ready, then we're gonna start the investment facilitation process. And this is triggered by the investor forum, or before that, once we share your summaries to the investors. So that's where the investment facilitation process actually starts. Now, again, I'd like to mention that in this loop that's remaining, what's important is to integrate the investor's feedback to your business plan. So it might happen that the mentoring process is finished, and that's when the comments from the investors come. We'll still relay that information to you and sort of give you guidance on how to incorporate them. But again, your initiative in making sure you produce the best business plan you can for your company is up to you. All right. So I guess we talked about this already. So I guess one final thing is, originally the graph was sloping, right? Sloping downwards. But what we want is, after this mentoring process, to have a really big jump downwards in terms of risk, of the perception of risk, at least, of the investors. So this is the point. This is the whole point of this exercise. Instead of going through this whole graph, this whole line, we want it to be abruptly, the risk reduced quickly by accelerating your, the maturity of your project, your awareness of what they're looking for, what are the good technologies, what business models have worked before, and that'll help reduce the risk right away. Okay, so I guess I want to end with one very famous quote: "Begin with the end in mind." And again, the end is for you to have investors running your project, because you do want to make your projects happen, right? So this whole exercise should lead to that, and all the effort you expend should lead to that. And we're here, the PFAN team is here, all the mentors are here to help you make that happen. So, so welcome. So this will start the mentoring process. So I hope it'll be a fruitful experience for you, because I'm sure it'll be for us. So there.